Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you enjoy werewolf romance stories filled with rejection, betrayal, and destiny, don't forget to subscribe to Alpha's Wolf Romance Library. Now, let's begin. The air inside the ceremonial hall was heavy, thick with the mingled scents of roses, smoke, and expectation. Chandeliers blazed above, their light reflecting off marble so polished it gleamed like water. The nobles were dressed in silk and velvet, their jewels flashing in the torchlight, their voices humming with excitement. It was supposed to be a night of unity. A night where two packs were bound together by vows spoken under the gaze of the moon. But for her, it was a night of chains. She stood at the front of the hall, her body rigid inside the ivory wedding gown laced tight around her chest. Her hands trembled at her sides, hidden within delicate gloves, but she kept her head bowed, her eyes fixed on the marble beneath her feet. She didn't dare lift her gaze, not when every pair of eyes in the hall was already burning holes into her. The rival Alpha stood beside her, tall, broad, smug in his triumph. His hand gripped her wrist too tightly, a silent reminder that she belonged to him, or so he believed. His lips curved in a smile, but his eyes gleamed with possession, not love. To him, she was not a bride. She was a prize. Whispers rippled through the hall, hushed but sharp enough to pierce her ears. She doesn't look happy. Of course not, she never wanted this. Still, what a powerful match. Two packs united. Their children will be strong. Her stomach twisted. Children. That word, thrown so carelessly, struck like a dagger. She wanted freedom, not the cold grip of a man she had never chosen. She wanted to be more than a bargaining chip, more than a pawn in the endless games of power her family had played. But no one asked what she wanted. No one cared. Her father sat in the front row, his eyes hard, his shoulders stiff with pride. To him, this union was victory. To her, it was a prison. The elder's voice boomed, echoing across the chamber. Tonight, under the gaze of the moon, we unite two packs. Tonight, vows will be spoken, and destiny sealed. Her chest tightened as the rival Alpha tightened his grip on her wrist, dragging her a step closer to the dais. She bit back a wince, her lips trembling as she forced herself to stand tall. Her heart pounded, her wolf restless inside her, pacing, growling, whispering warnings she didn't understand. The elder raised his staff. Do you, Alpha of the West, take this woman to be your maid and Luna? I do, the rival Alpha said smugly, his voice steady, proud, certain. The elder turned to her. And do you? The doors exploded open. A thunderous crash reverberated through the hall, the heavy oak doors slamming against the marble walls. Gasps erupted from the crowd as heads whipped toward the entrance. And there he stood. The Alpha King. His presence filled the doorway like a storm-given flesh. Tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a dark cloak that seemed to drink the light around him. His golden eyes glowed faintly, burning through the haze of shock that fell over the room. Every step he took echoed like a heartbeat, steady and unrelenting. The nobles froze. Servants shrank back. Even the rival Alpha stiffened, his smugness faltering. The girl's breath caught in her throat. Her heart slammed against her ribs, her hands trembling violently at her sides. She had heard stories of him, every wolf had. The Alpha King, unmatched in strength, feared by rivals, obeyed by all. He did not attend ceremonies like these. He did not meddle in petty alliances. So why was he here? The Alpha King's gaze swept the hall, brushing over the elders, over the nobles, over the rival Alpha still gripping her wrist. And then, it landed on her. Her breath stopped. Her body froze. Golden eyes locked onto hers, steady, fierce, unyielding. The hall held its breath. And in that moment, she understood, this night would not end the way her father planned. This was no wedding. This was a war. Long before the ceremony, before the gown and the vows, her fate had been sealed. She was not born into freedom. She was born into a bargain. Her father had always been a man who valued power above all else. He measured worth not in kindness or loyalty, but in alliances, wealth, and influence. From the moment she could walk, she understood that she was not truly his daughter, she was his tool. When she was only a child, the rival Alpha came to their home. She remembered it vividly, the way his dark eyes had scanned her with unsettling hunger, the way her father's smile had been sharp, triumphant, as though he had just secured a great victory. This one, the rival Alpha had said, pointing at her small frame. She'll do. And her father had nodded. Promised. From this day forward. She hadn't understood then. She had thought it was some harmless arrangement, some distant promise that would never reach her. But as she grew, the whispers followed. She belongs to him. She is promised. She cannot choose. Those words became her identity. While other girls laughed at festivals, dreaming of fated mates, she remained silent, her smile fading whenever her gaze drifted to the rival Alpha watching from a distance. While others trained with their wolves, testing the strength of their bond, she was taught obedience, submission, silence. Her wolf, restless and fiery, hated it. At night, it paced inside her, growling low, whispering that this path was wrong. But what could she do? She was one girl against two packs bound by an oath older than she was. By the time she reached her teenage years, she realized the depth of her father's betrayal. The rival Alpha visited often, each time treating her less like a person and more like property he had already purchased. He would smirk at her silence, his words dripping with arrogance. Soon, you'll be mine. A Luna worthy of me. The bile rose in her throat every time he said it. She begged her father once, tears streaming down her face as she fell to her knees. Please, don't make me do this. Don't give me to him. Her father's expression had been cold, his eyes hard. This is not about you. This is about the pack. About survival. You will do your duty. Her duty. That word became a chain around her neck, dragging her deeper into despair with every passing year. She watched as her friends found mates, bonds sparking between them like fire in the night. She watched their joy, their laughter, their freedom to choose. And in her heart, she buried the truth, that she wanted that too. That she wanted to be loved for who she was, not for what she could give. But in her world, choice was not hers to hold. The closer the wedding drew, the more suffocating the whispers became. Servants muttered about the strength of the future alliance. Nobles spoke of the children she would bear, the power they would inherit. No one asked if she wanted any of it. No one cared. The rival Alpha grew bolder, his hand gripping her arm too tightly when he visited, his smile sharp with possession. Her wolf bristled every time, snarling in her mind, but she bit her tongue until it bled. On the eve of the ceremony, she stood alone by her window, staring at the moon. The night air was cold, her tears slipping silently down her cheeks. She whispered into the darkness, her voice trembling. Please, let there be another way. Please. Her wolf stirred, restless, uneasy, as though it knew something she didn't. And perhaps, somewhere in the silence of the night, the moon had listened. Because while she believed her fate was sealed, while she believed there was no escape from the chains her father and the rival Alpha had wrapped around her, destiny had already begun to shift. Far from her window, in the shadows of the kingdom, another set of golden eyes had turned toward her. Eyes that would not allow her to be bound by chains. Eyes that would crash into her life like a storm. The Alpha King. The night before the ceremony, the village celebrated. Music drifted through the streets, drums beating like eager hearts, voices raised in song and laughter. Wolves danced beneath the glow of lanterns, drinking and feasting, celebrating what they thought would be a powerful union. She did not join them. Instead, she sat alone in her chamber, the laughter of others muffled by the stone walls around her. The silk gown prepared for her hung near the mirror, shimmering in the candlelight, a cruel reminder of what awaited her at dawn. Her fingers traced the edge of the window, her eyes fixed on the silver moon hanging above. It was beautiful, serene, untouchable, everything she longed to be. Her chest tightened as she whispered to the night, "Do you see me? Or am I invisible to you too?" Her wolf stirred inside her, restless, growling faintly as though it shared her unease. She had always felt it, that tug deep in her soul, a bond to something greater, something waiting. But every time she tried to listen, her father's words drowned it out. "Your fate is sealed. You belong to him." She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. She dreamed of something else, something fragile and impossible. She dreamed of freedom. In her dreams, she ran beneath the moon, her wolf unleashed, the wind singing through her fur. No chains. No vows. No father's voice. No rival alpha's grip. Only her and the night, wild and unbound. But dreams were dangerous. Dreams made hope. And hope, she had learned, was the cruelest weapon of all. She rose from the window and crossed the small chamber, her fingers brushing against the silk gown. The fabric was soft, delicate, shimmering, everything she was not. She hated it. It felt like a costume, a lie, something to cover the truth of who she was. A sob escaped her throat as she pressed her forehead against the gown, whispering, "I don't want this. I don't want him." Her wolf answered with a low, angry growl inside her mind. "Run." The thought jolted her, her breath catching in her chest. She had thought of it before, slipping away into the night, vanishing before dawn, disappearing into the wilderness where no one could find her. She imagined it now, her bare feet hitting the forest floor, her wolf carrying her far away, away from her father, away from the rival alpha, away from the chains. But fear held her back. If she ran, her father would pay the price. If she ran, her pack would be punished. The rival alpha would hunt her, drag her back in chains, and the whispers of her cowardice would spread like fire. She wrapped her arms around herself, trembling. There is no way out. Her wolf snarled again, restless, angry. It hated submission, hated chains, hated silence. Sometimes she wondered if her wolf knew something she didn't, if it waited for a future she couldn't see. But the only future she saw was one of despair. She returned to the window, sinking to her knees as she looked up at the moon. Her tears glistened as she whispered again, her voice breaking. "Please, if anyone is listening, if the moon has any mercy at all, save me. Just once, let me be seen." The wind stirred faintly, rustling through the trees beyond the walls. For a moment, she felt something, a shiver across her skin, a sense of being watched, of being heard. Her wolf lifted its head inside her, ears pricked, a low growl rumbling not in fear but in recognition. She frowned, clutching her chest. "What is it?" she whispered. Her wolf did not answer with words, but with certainty. "Something is coming." Her lips trembled, her heart pounding faster as she pressed her forehead to the window sill. She wanted to believe. She wanted to hope. But she had been betrayed too many times by hope before. And so she whispered one last plea, her voice so soft it barely reached the night. "Please, don't let tomorrow be the end of me." Unseen beyond the walls, in the distant shadows of the kingdom, golden eyes opened in the dark. Eyes that burned with power, with promise, with destiny. The Alpha King had heard. And he was already on his way. The ceremonial hall had never looked so alive. Gold drapes hung from the vaulted ceiling, torches burned with steady flames, and the marble floor gleamed as if polished with moonlight itself. Nobles filled the rows, their gowns flashing with jewels, their laughter brittle with superiority. Servants rushed about, setting goblets of wine and platters of meat along the side tables. But beneath the glitter and grandeur, there was a sharp edge to the air, the hum of gossip, the simmer of expectation. Everyone knew this night was not about love. It was about power. At the front of the hall, she stood beside the rival Alpha, her trembling hands hidden within the folds of her dress. Her eyes stayed fixed on the marble floor, afraid that if she looked up, the weight of all those watching eyes would crush her completely. The rival Alpha stood tall and smug, his cloak lined with wolf fur, his chin tilted arrogantly as he looked down on the crowd. To him, this was victory. He had waited for years to claim her, to cement his dominance not just over her but over her entire pack. Tonight, before the eyes of the moon, she would finally be his. Her father sat in the front row, his shoulders square with pride, his eyes sharp with cold satisfaction. She dared not meet his gaze. If she did, she feared she would see only chains staring back at her. The elder stepped forward, his silver robes brushing the floor, his staff glowing faintly with the power of the ceremony. His voice boomed across the hall, carrying the weight of tradition. Tonight, we gather under the gaze of the moon. Tonight, a bond will be sealed. 2 packs will become one. Strength will be multiplied, and the will of the moon will be honored. The crowd murmured their approval, heads nodding, voices whispering. Her chest tightened. Her lungs refused to expand. The fabric of her gown felt like a cage, every stitch a reminder of her prison. She wanted to scream, to cry, to run, but her feet were anchored to the marble, her father's voice echoing in her mind. Do your duty. The elder lifted his staff higher. Do you, Alpha of the West, take this woman as your Luna? I do, the rival Alpha said smoothly, his voice dripping with arrogance. His grip on her wrist tightened, a silent claim, a cruel reminder. The elder turned to her. His eyes, sharp and expectant, cut into her trembling frame. And do you, daughter of the East, take this Alpha as your mate? The hall fell silent. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Her throat burned with the scream trapped inside her, the desperate refusal clawing to break free. Her hands trembled violently, her body screaming for escape. But her father's eyes bored into her, hard and unyielding. She saw the threat in his gaze, the promise of ruin if she defied him. The rival Alpha's grip dug into her skin, bruising, warning her of the cost of resistance. She closed her eyes, her tears slipping silently down her cheeks. I have no choice, she thought. This is my fate. Her wolf snarled inside her, restless, furious, pacing against the walls of her soul. No. Not him. Not this. She drew in a shaky breath, forcing her lips to move, her voice barely more than a whisper. The doors slammed open. The sound cracked through the silence like thunder. Gasps erupted, heads whipped toward the entrance, whispers exploded like wildfire. And there he was. The Alpha King. He stood in the doorway, his frame towering, his dark cloak flowing behind him like a shadow brought to life. His golden eyes glowed faintly in the torchlight, steady and unyielding, his presence filling the hall with raw power. Every wolf in the room felt it instantly, the ripple of dominance that pressed into their chests, forcing their wolves to bow instinctively. Her breath caught. Her chest froze. The rival Alpha stiffened, his smugness faltering, his grip on her wrist tightening. What is he doing here? Someone whispered urgently. This was not expected, another cried. The elder faltered, his staff trembling in his hand, his voice shaking. My king, you were not summoned. The Alpha King ignored him. His gaze swept the hall, sharp and cutting, brushing past the nobles, past the elders, past the rival Alpha's trembling frame. And then his eyes landed on her. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Her knees nearly buckled. For the first time in her life, someone looked at her and saw more than a bargaining chip, more than a pawn, more than a promise made without her consent. He looked at her as though she mattered. Golden eyes locked onto hers, steady, fierce, unrelenting. And in that moment, she knew, the night was no longer about duty. The night had just become destiny. The air shifted the moment he stepped into the hall. The heavy oak doors still trembled on their hinges, the echo of his entrance reverberating like distant thunder. The nobles froze in their seats, their jeweled fans stilled mid-wave, their mouths parted in disbelief. The servants clutched their trays tighter, wine spilling over the edges of goblets as they bowed instinctively. Even the chandeliers seemed to sway faintly, their crystals trembling as though the building itself recognized who had arrived. The Alpha King. His presence rolled through the chamber like a storm wind, pressing into every chest, demanding instinctive submission. His dark cloak, lined with silver, flowed behind him with each deliberate step, his boots striking the marble with the rhythm of command. He carried no crown, no need for it, his golden eyes alone marked him. They glowed faintly beneath the torchlight, steady, unyielding, cutting through the crowd with ruthless precision. Every wolf in the room felt the weight of him. Their wolves stirred uneasily, ears flattened, tails tucked, recognizing the dominance of a power far greater than their own. Some nobles bowed without realizing, their bodies betraying their pride. And still, he did not look at them. His gaze swept across the room once, sharp as a blade, before fixing on the dais. On her. Her breath caught in her throat. She stood trembling beside the rival Alpha, her wedding gown clinging like chains, her hands curled tightly at her sides. Her lips parted, but no sound escaped, her body frozen as those golden eyes locked onto hers. For a heartbeat, the hall ceased to exist. The whispers, the torches, the stares, all of it faded beneath the intensity of his gaze. She felt stripped bare, every secret, every sorrow, every desperate longing laid open under his eyes. And in that moment, she was seen. Truly seen. The rival Alpha bristled, his grip tightening painfully on her wrist as his lips curled into a sneer. "My king," he spat, his voice edged with fury, "this is no place for you. This is my ceremony." The king stopped at the foot of the dais, his golden gaze flicking briefly to the rival Alpha. A muscle in his jaw flexed, but his voice remained low, measured, heavy with authority. "Your ceremony?" The rival Alpha straightened, puffing his chest, his arrogance battling the instinctive tremor in his wolf. "She was promised to me. This union is sealed by oath. You have no right to be here." The hall gasped. The audacity of challenging the king rippled through the crowd, whispers hissing in every corner. But the king only tilted his head, his eyes narrowing faintly. His wolf stirred beneath his skin, its growl a vibration that reverberated through the marble itself. "No right?" he repeated softly, dangerously. "You forget who I am." The rival Alpha's smirk faltered, sweat beating at his temple, though his grip on her did not loosen. "She belongs to me," he said stubbornly, his voice cracking slightly. The king's golden gaze dropped to where the rival Alpha's hand gripped her wrist. His expression darkened, his wolf's power surging in a wave that slammed into the hall. Nobles gasped as the air grew heavy, the weight of his dominance forcing their heads lower, their bodies trembling under instinctive submission. The rival Alpha stumbled, his knees buckling, his hand faltering as he struggled against the crushing force. But still, he clung to her wrist like a desperate man clinging to victory. The king's voice cut through the chaos, low and final. "She belongs to no one." The hall fell silent. The girl's chest heaved, her tears brimming as she looked up at him. For years, she had been told she was property, a pawn, a bargaining chip. To hear those words, spoken with such certainty, such power, broke something open inside her. Her lips trembled as she whispered, almost too softly for anyone but him to hear. Why me? The king's gaze softened, though his voice remained steady, fierce. Because I see you. Her knees nearly buckled, her heart slamming against her ribs. The rival alpha snarled, his pride shredding beneath the humiliation, his wolf snapping as he bared his teeth. You can't take her. She is mine by promise. The king's wolf surged, its growl filling the chamber, rattling the very chandeliers above. His golden eyes blazed as he stepped onto the dais, his cloak sweeping across the marble. He stood directly before the rival alpha now, his presence towering, suffocating. She is not yours, he thundered, his voice cracking like lightning. Not by promise. Not by oath. Not by any right. The rival alpha's wolf whimpered inside him, buckling beneath the weight of the king's dominance. His hand finally loosened, his grip on her wrist breaking as he staggered back, his chest heaving. The king turned to her then, his hand extending slowly, steady, patient. His golden eyes burned into hers, softening just enough to reach past her fear. Come with me, he said. Her breath caught, her tears spilling as the hall erupted in gasps. Nobles whispered frantically, elders clutched their staffs, outrage and fear mingling in their voices. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Because for the first time in her life, she had a choice. The hall erupted in chaos the moment the Alpha King's hand extended toward her. Gasps rippled like waves through the crowd. Nobles clutched their pearls, servants covered their mouths, elders gripped their staffs as if the wood could steady them against the storm brewing before their eyes. She stood frozen, trembling, staring at his outstretched hand. For years, no one had ever given her a choice. For years, her life had been dictated by promises and threats, by her father's cold ambition and the rival Alpha's possessive grip. And now, here it was, a hand offered, not forced. But fear tightened around her like chains. The rival Alpha shoved forward, his chest heaving, his face twisted with rage. His wolf snarled behind his eyes, desperate to reclaim control. You dare, he spat, his voice cracking with fury. She is mine. Promised to me since she was a child. You cannot take what belongs to me. The king's golden eyes turned to him, steady, sharp, unyielding. His voice, low but resonant, cut through the chaos like a blade. She belongs to no one. The rival Alpha's face reddened, his hands shaking as he pointed a trembling finger at the king. This is my ceremony. My claim. By oath, by tradition, by blood, she is mine. The elders stepped forward quickly, their staffs glowing faintly, their voices raised in trembling authority. The boy speaks truth, one elder declared. The promise was made under the moon. Tradition binds her. Not even a king can undo what has been sealed. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the nobles, their whispers rising like a storm. He's breaking the laws. This is madness. The moon will curse us all if he defies tradition. Her knees trembled beneath the weight of their words. Her chest heaved, her breath shallow, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. She looked at the king, her lips trembling. They're right, she whispered, her voice barely audible. You can't. I'm already promised. I can't defy them. The king's gaze softened as it returned to her, but his voice held steady, fierce with conviction. You are not a promise. You are not an oath. You are a person. And you have a voice. Speak it. Her breath caught, her chest tightening. Her wolf stirred inside her, restless, urging her forward. For years she had been silent, for years she had swallowed her truth, but here, under the eyes of the entire pack, the Alpha King was asking her to do what she had never dared, to speak. The rival Alpha sneered, his voice dripping with arrogance. Go on, little dove. Tell them. Tell them how you've longed to be mine. Tell them how you accept what the moon decreed. His hand reached for her wrist again, but before his fingers touched her, the king's wolf surged. The growl that ripped from his chest shook the marble beneath their feet. The rival alpha stumbled back, his hand frozen midair, his body trembling beneath the weight of the king's dominance. "Do not touch her," the king thundered. The hall fell silent, the torches flickering violently, shadows dancing across the walls. The air itself seemed to tremble with his words. Her lips parted, her tears spilling. She looked from the rival alpha's furious face to the king's steady golden eyes, and something inside her cracked. Her voice shook, but it carried. "I don't want this union." Gasps filled the hall. The elders stiffened, the nobles whispered in disbelief, her father's face turned pale with shock. Her voice grew stronger, her tears burning hot down her cheeks. "I never wanted this. I never chose this. I begged, I pleaded, but no one listened. You all treated me like property, like a pawn in your games. But I am not his. I was never his." The rival alpha's face twisted with rage, his wolf snarling as he lunged forward. "Lies," he shouted. "You are mine by promise, and you will." The Alpha King's wolf erupted, golden light blazing through his eyes as his growl shook the entire hall. The rival Alpha froze mid-step, his body trembling violently under the crushing force of dominance that pressed him to his knees. "She has spoken," the king roared, his voice thunderous. "And her voice is law." The elders staggered back, their staffs dimming. The nobles bowed their heads, some in fear, some in awe, none daring to challenge the authority flooding the hall. The rival Alpha's chest heaved as he struggled against the invisible weight, spittle flying from his lips as he snarled. "She was mine." The king stepped forward, his shadow falling over the kneeling Alpha, his golden eyes blazing with fire. "She was never yours. She never will be. From this night forward, she is mine." The hall erupted again, voices shouting, gasps echoing, chaos swirling. But none of it mattered. Because in that moment, for the first time in her life, she had spoken her truth. And he had heard it. The rival Alpha's chest heaved, his breaths ragged, his pride shredded. Forced to his knees before the pack, humiliated by the king's dominance, his fury burned hotter than fire. His wolf snarled within him, snapping and clawing, desperate to reclaim what had been stolen. His eyes, once smug, now blazed with hatred. His voice broke through the stunned silence of the hall, raw and venomous. "No. This will not stand." Gasps rippled through the crowd, nobles whispering frantically, servants shrinking against the walls. The elders stiffened, their staffs glowing faintly as they braced for what they knew was coming. The rival Alpha rose slowly, trembling but defiant, his wolf pushing against the crushing weight of the king's presence. His lips curled into a snarl as his eyes locked onto the king. "You think you can humiliate me in front of my pack? You think you can steal what was promised to me? Then prove it. Prove your right to claim her." The hall erupted in chaos. "Challenge," someone gasped. "He's challenging the king," another cried. "This is madness, he'll be slaughtered." The rival Alpha's voice thundered over the noise, his hand pointing at the king with shaking fury. "By law, by tradition, by the moon itself, I challenge you for her. Fight me, or admit you are a coward hiding behind dominance alone." The crowd stilled, their voices silenced by the weight of his words. No one had dared to challenge the Alpha King in years. And now, before the eyes of the pack, the unthinkable had been spoken. The girl's chest constricted, her heart slamming against her ribs as she gasped. "No, no, please," her voice trembled as she clutched at the king's cloak, her tears spilling. "Don't do this. He'll kill you." But the king's golden eyes burned steady as they met hers, his voice calm, resolute, unshakable. "He cannot kill what he cannot touch." Her lips parted, her knees trembling, her wolf whimpering inside her chest. But his gaze anchored her, steadying her storm. The rival alpha stepped forward, his wolf bristling beneath his skin, his growl reverberating through the hall. She was mine. Promised to me by oath. You think you can take her because of your title? Because of your glowing eyes? Prove it, king. Fight me for her. The king's cloak shifted as he loosened it from his shoulders, letting it fall to the marble floor with a heavy thud. The golden glow in his eyes flared brighter, his wolf rising with a power that pressed into every chest in the hall. If it is a fight you want, he said, his voice low but carrying like thunder, then a fight you will have. The hall trembled with anticipation, the pack's wolves stirring in their chests. Some whispered in awe, others in fear. The elders exchanged anxious glances, their staffs quivering faintly as if they too could feel the storm about to break. The rival alpha smirked, emboldened by the formality of his challenge, his pride demanding victory. He circled, his wolf's presence bleeding into the air, a mix of arrogance and desperation. The girl's tears streamed down her cheeks as she clutched her trembling hands together. Her body shook, torn between terror and hope, her heart screaming in silence, "Please, let him win. Please don't let this be the end." The king did not move at first. He stood tall, unyielding, his gaze fixed calmly on his opponent. His wolf simmered beneath the surface, waiting, watching. The rival alpha lunged first. His growl tore through the hall as his claws extended, his wolf flashing through his skin, his muscles surging with fury. He struck with all the desperation of a man fighting not just for a woman but for his pride, his power, his very name. The king moved like a storm unleashed. He sidestepped with deadly grace, his hands snapping out to catch the rival alpha's wrist mid-strike. With a single twist, bone cracked, and the rival alpha roared in pain. The king's golden eyes blazed as he shoved him back, his voice booming. "You never saw her. You saw only what she could give you. That is why you will never have her." The rival alpha staggered but lunged again, blood dripping from his split lip, his eyes wild with hatred. His claws raked the air, but the king's wolf surged, golden light exploding from his chest. The force of it slammed into the rival alpha, sending him crashing across the marble floor. The crowd gasped, nobles stumbling back, servants crying out, elders clutching their staffs tighter. The rival alpha struggled to rise, his chest heaving, his pride bleeding more than his body. But still, he snarled. "She was mine. She will always be mine." The king advanced, each step deliberate, his presence radiating power so thick the torches flickered violently, shadows bending to him. His voice thundered across the hall, final and absolute. "She was never yours. She chose. And I claimed what was always meant to be mine." The rival alpha faltered, his knees buckling beneath the crushing weight of the king's wolf. With a final roar, he collapsed, his body hitting the marble with a hollow thud, defeated and broken. The hall fell silent, every breath held as the Alpha King stood above his fallen challenger. His golden eyes swept the crowd, daring anyone else to speak, to defy, to question. None did. The girl's tears flowed freely, her chest breaking as she looked at him. Relief and awe mingled in her heart. He had fought for her. Not as a pawn. Not as property. But as someone worth claiming. The king extended his hand to her again, steady, patient, waiting. And this time, with the eyes of the entire pack upon her, she reached for it. The rival Alpha lay crumpled on the marble floor, his body broken, his pride shattered. The hall was silent, thick with the weight of what had just unfolded. Nobles dared not breathe too loudly, servants pressed themselves against the walls, and the elders stood stiffly, their staffs trembling faintly as though even their ancient power bent beneath the storm that had passed. At the center of it all, the Alpha King stood tall, unyielding, his chest rising steady with power. His golden eyes glowed, his wolf's dominance still radiating through the chamber like heat from a blazing fire. He was not just a man. He was the king. And yet, when he turned, when his gaze shifted to her, something softened. Her breath caught in her throat as their eyes met. She stood trembling at the edge of the dais, her wedding gown wrinkled and heavy, her hands clutching the fabric at her sides. Her lips parted, but words failed her. All she could do was stare at the hand he extended once more, steady, patient, unyielding. The hall seemed to lean in, the silence pulsing with expectation. This was the moment. Her father's glare burned from the front row, his face pale with fury, his pride unraveling with every heartbeat. The nobles whispered furiously, some outraged, others in awe. The elders shifted uneasily, as if torn between tradition and truth. But none of their voices mattered. Her wolf stirred inside her, its growl low but certain, urging her forward. For the first time in her life, she felt its strength not as a restless protest, but as a guiding force. Her tears blurred her vision as she lifted her trembling hand and placed it into his. The bond sparked instantly. Heat surged through her veins, golden fire racing across her skin, flooding her chest, her soul. She gasped, her knees buckling, but his grip held her steady, grounding her. The power of his wolf poured into her, wrapping around her like a shield, pulling her closer, binding her. Gasps filled the hall. Nobles clutched their throats, elders stumbled back, servants stared in awe. The king's voice thundered through the chamber, final and absolute. From this night forward, she is mine. No oath, no tradition, no alpha will stand against this bond. She is my Luna. And before the moon, I claim her. Moonlight poured suddenly through the high arched windows, silver and brilliant, bathing them both in its glow. The marble floor shimmered, the chandeliers rattled, the torches flared higher as the bond sealed with undeniable force. The elders gasped, their staffs dimming as they bowed their heads. The nobles stumbled to their knees, forced by instinct, their wolves bending beneath the moon's decree. The rival alpha groaned from the floor, his body trembling, his wolf whimpering in submission. His eyes burned with hatred, but he dared not rise, dared not speak. The weight of the bond was too great, the truth undeniable. Her chest heaved as she clutched his hand, her tears flowing freely. For years she had been told she was nothing, a pawn, property to be traded. For years she had been silenced, her voice buried beneath promises she never made. And now, before the eyes of the entire pack, she had been claimed, not as property, but as Luna. The Alpha King bent closer, his forehead brushing against hers, his golden eyes softening as his voice lowered for her alone. You are free now. Free of him. Free of them. And you will never bow again. Her sobs broke openly, her body trembling as she whispered back. You saved me. His thumb brushed against her cheek, wiping away her tears, his voice firm yet tender. No. You saved yourself when you spoke. I only gave you the strength to be heard. The moonlight flared brighter, as though blessing the union, sealing it beyond doubt. The hall remained bowed, every head lowered, every voice silenced. The Alpha King lifted her hand higher, his voice rising once more for all to hear. She is not cursed. She is not a pawn. She is not his. She is mine. She is your queen. She is Luna. The hall shook with the weight of his words. The girl, no, the Luna, stood trembling beside him, her chest filled with fire, her wolf howling within her in triumph. For the first time in her life, she was not invisible. For the first time, she was not powerless. She was chosen. She was seen. She was his. The silence that followed the king's declaration was thick, crushing, alive with disbelief. The nobles shifted uneasily on their knees, their jeweled gowns pooling around them, their faces pale with shock. Some bowed willingly, their wolves cowed by the king's dominance, while others trembled with pride torn to shreds. The elders gripped their staffs tighter, their eyes darting between one another as though searching desperately for a loophole, a word of protest that might undo what had just been sealed. But the moonlight above had already spoken. It poured down through the tall windows, bathing the king and his new Luna in silver brilliance. The bond shimmered in the air, undeniable, unbreakable. Her chest rose and fell in rapid breaths as she looked around the hall, her hands still gripped tightly in his. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. These were the same nobles who had whispered about her, laughed at her, dismissed her as worthless. Now their heads were bent, their bodies bowed in submission. Her lips trembled, her tears burning hot as she whispered, "They're bowing." The king turned his golden gaze to her, his thumb brushing the back of her hand. His voice was low, steady, carrying the weight of truth. They bow because they must. Soon, they will bow because they choose to. That is the difference between fear and respect. And you, Luna, will give them reason to respect you. Her heart cracked, another sob slipping free. She pressed her hand to her lips, overwhelmed, trembling with disbelief. Then, from the front row, a voice cut through the silence. Her father. He rose to his feet, his face red with fury, his fists trembling at his sides. His wolf snarled within him, though even it quaked beneath the king's dominance. His voice was raw, desperate, filled with rage. This is treachery. This is madness. She was promised to the West. She was mine to give. You had no right. The hall gasped, nobles shifting uncomfortably, servants shrinking into the shadows. The elders stiffened, some daring to lift their heads. The king's golden eyes flicked to the man, his expression cold, unyielding. No right, he repeated, his voice dangerous in its calm. You gave away what was never yours to give. Her father faltered, but his pride pushed him forward. He pointed a trembling finger at her, his voice breaking with venom. She was nothing. Worthless. Do you not see? She has no strength, no worth. She was my bargaining chip, and nothing more. You shame yourself by choosing her. The words struck her like knives. Her knees buckled, her breath catching in her throat, her heart aching with the familiar sting of his cruelty. For a moment, she was a child again, kneeling at his feet, begging to be seen, to be loved, to be more than a tool. But then, the king's hand tightened around hers. His presence wrapped around her like armor, his voice thunderous, final. You dare speak of her worth? The hall trembled with his fury, the torches flaring violently, the marble floor vibrating beneath his growl. Nobles gasped, some bowing lower, servants covering their ears against the force of his voice. She is worth more than you will ever be, the king roared. She is Luna. Chosen not by oath, not by tradition, not by you, but by me, and by the moon itself. From this night forward, your words mean nothing. Her father staggered back, his face pale, his pride cracking. His wolf whimpered inside him, forced into submission by the king's dominance. With a final tremor, he bowed, his head dropping low, his fists clenched in defeat. Her tears spilled freely now, but they were not only tears of pain. They were tears of release. For the first time, her father's voice no longer held power over her. The elders bowed next, their staffs striking the marble in unison as they lowered their heads. Luna, they murmured reluctantly, acknowledging the truth they could not deny. One by one, the nobles followed. Their whispers silenced, their pride shattered, they bent their heads and bowed before her. The sea of silk and jewels became a tide of submission, their defiance drowned beneath the weight of destiny. The girl, no, the Luna, stood trembling at the king's side, her heart breaking open with the sight. She had been promised away like property. She had been treated as worthless. She had been silenced, ignored, dismissed. And now, before the eyes of the entire pack, they bowed. To her. Her lips trembled as she whispered to the king, "Why me? Out of everyone you could have chosen, why me? His golden eyes softened, his forehead lowering to hers, his voice low, steady, a vow sealed by fire. Because where they saw nothing, I saw everything. You are not just mine. You are more than you will ever know. And soon, they will see it too. Her sobs broke openly, her tears spilling freely as she clung to his hand. And in that moment, beneath the moon's glow, with the pack bowed at her feet, she finally believed it. She was not worthless. She was Luna. The hall remained bowed, silence heavy as stone, the weight of destiny pressing down on every soul present. The elders did not speak, the nobles dared not whisper, and her father's fury had been silenced beneath the king's dominance. For the first time in her life, the air was not filled with scorn or judgment or chains. For the first time, she was free. Her chest rose and fell in unsteady breaths as she looked around the grand chamber. A hall that once felt like her prison now became the place of her rebirth. She stood taller, though her knees still trembled, her gown heavy with the remnants of fear. But her hand was steady in his, anchored by the Alpha King's unyielding presence. The moonlight streamed through the windows above, soft and silver, wrapping her in its glow. It was as though the moon itself whispered, "I see you now." The king turned to her, his golden eyes steady, fierce but softened by something gentler only she was allowed to see. He bent slightly, his forehead brushing against hers, his voice low, intimate, meant only for her. "You are mine. Not because I took you from him. Not because I claimed you before them. But because you chose me." Her lips trembled, her tears glistening as she whispered back. "I was so afraid. All my life, I believed I had no voice. Tonight, you gave me one." His thumb brushed against her cheek, his touch grounding her. "No. Tonight, you found your own voice. And I promise you, Luna, the world will never silence you again." Her sobs broke openly, but they were no longer tears of despair. They were tears of release, of healing, of hope she had buried so deep she thought it had died. She clung to him, trembling, as the truth of his vow settled in her chest. The king turned back to the hall, his voice rising, thunderous and final. "You have seen the truth tonight. You have seen her strength, her courage, her worth. She is not cursed. She is not property. She is Luna, chosen by me and blessed by the moon. And from this night forward, you will honor her as such. If you do not, you will answer to me." A wave of submission rippled through the crowd. Heads bowed lower, shoulders hunched in instinctive obedience. The elders lowered their staffs fully, their heads bent in solemn surrender. And slowly, she realized, no one would ever laugh at her again. The rival Alpha still lay defeated at the base of the dais, his wolf broken, his pride shattered. He dared not rise, dared not speak. His silence was as loud as the king's roar. Her father, pale and trembling, remained kneeling, his eyes filled with a fury he could no longer voice. His power had been stripped, his control shattered. For once, his voice did not matter. Hers did. She turned her face up to the king, her lips trembling, her voice breaking softly. "What happens now?" He looked down at her, his gaze steady, his hand tightening around hers. "Now, you begin again. Not as a pawn. Not as a promise. But as my Luna. My queen." Her heart cracked open, her wolf howling inside her with joy, with freedom, with triumph. For the first time, she stood not as the girl promised away, but as the woman chosen, powerful, alive. The hall bowed once more, their voices silent, their submission complete. And in the glow of the moon, she finally believed it. She was no longer bound by chains. She was Luna. She was his. Sometimes, the chains that bind us are not forged by steel, but by silence, by promises we never made, by voices that told us we were worthless. Tonight, she found the courage to speak, and the Alpha King gave her the freedom to be heard. If you were in her place, standing in that hall, would you have taken the king's hand, or bowed to tradition? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us here at Alpha's Wolf Romance Library for more tales of rejection, destiny, and love powerful enough to rewrite fate.